A lot of money and a lot of message this week in a speedy special session originally called to pass bills to support Israel in its fight for existence and against terrorism. Your Florida lawmakers expanded the call, put millions more toward hurricane relief and toward school vouchers. But it was the emotionally and historically charged issue of war that led to some of the tensest moments.
Why is there no mention of the hostages, the 241 hostages, including the babies that you care about? Why is there no mention of them or them being released?
Initially, I put in de-escalation, and I thought that was all-encompassing. How many will be enough? The hundreds and thousands of babies and children that don't have the privilege to take their first step, blow out their first birthday candle, but according to some in this room, they're terrorists.
Two of your South Florida reps are here to talk about it all. State Senator Shevrin Jones, Democrat repping Miami Gardens to Miami Beach, and State Representative Vicki Lopez is a Republican representing Miami and Key Biscayne. Welcome, friends.
Hello.
Good morning,
Thank you for
Glenna.
having us.
Good morning, Senator.
Good to see you.
Good morning.
So, Vicki, can I start with you because you were in the House at the time. That was Representative from Jacksonville, Angie Nixon, with a failed resolution. Take us through that very tense moment. Her resolution failed, met harshly. Help us process what happened there.
So it's very interesting because I was somewhat taken surprised by her resolution. I learned that morning from one of her Democrat colleagues who was very upset about it. And apparently she had kind of sprung this on her caucus the night before. And there was just a lot of, discontent. And I said, well, let's wait and see what happens on the floor. And when we got to the floor, there was the resolution was preceded by a very emotionally measured speech, if you will, from the well by Representative Michael Gottlieb, who is the head of our Jewish caucus in the House. And he was so amazingly on target. You could have heard a pin drop. And this was after, after Representative Nixon had actually introduced her bill, her resolution. And so I think a lot of us expected Representative Nixon to say, listen, I waive my clothes. I think my resolution, as explained, was sufficient. But instead, we were met with what I was so shocked by, which was the lack of decorum inside that chamber. I am a big proponent of hearing differing ideas and respectful debate, but Representative Nixon began to yell and scream and cry, and I think it took everyone by surprise. In addition to the fact that her resolution did not call for a ceasefire with the release of the hostages. It just called for a ceasefire, and her own caucus is made up of several Jewish members who were dismayed at it. So we as Republicans were watching that debate go on between the Democrats. And I think it was, I have to tell you, I thought it was pretty shocking, and it sort of lived with us after the session because I'd never seen in the 30 years that I've been working in Tallahassee, I'd never seen such a display of a lack of decorum inside that chamber.
Sounds like in the State House, it reflects what's going on in Congress and in the streets as well. Senator Shevrin Jones, the Senate actually passed all of the bills having to do with Israel pretty quickly and unanimously. And one of those, there's money set aside for protection of institutions. The bills in the House and Senate are identical. There's also expanded sanctions on Iran. Having to do with state investments and state companies. Practically speaking, what does that do at a state level?
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Glenna. So right now, the governor made it clear, and the legislature made it clear that any businesses that's doing business with Iran and that resides in the state of Florida, basically saying that, that can't happen. I think Senator Avila's bill is supposed to ensure that individuals who are associated with the Iranian businesses, they do not exploit American enterprises by adding new sanctions against companies that do business with Iran. However, there are still concerns about how this would be implemented, how Florida businesses could be affected by this legislation, and how it could impact our economy. So we still don't know how this bill will be enforced. My legislative staff reached out to the Department of Economic Opportunity, the Florida Chamber of Commerce, and the Department of Business and Professional Regulation to inquire about how many Iranian businesses that there are that possibly can be or will be affected by this. And we were told that they don't have that information and have no way of keeping track of it in the first place. So this could be a slippery slope that we're going down. But yet and still, I think it is important that we should not be supporting anyone who supports terrorism.
So a lot of, it sounds like what you're saying is a lot of what happened in the session is kind of messaging more than pinpointing exact problems to fix. And I think one of those is also adding money to the school voucher program, eliminating the waiting list for families who need vouchers to go to school, especially for special ability schools. But again, there is no way to know what the number is on that. How many? Is that a blank check?
Well, I mean, literally, I think it is a blank check without us knowing that number. But I do not want to take that away from the Family Empowerment Scholarship for the students with unique abilities. And I want to be clear. We dealt with the Family Empowerment Scholarship with HB1 last year. This expansion is for individuals who have unique ability. These are children who have extreme need, and those dollars have to reach them. Here's the problem that we're dealing with within the state of Florida. We have many of the SFOs are not turning over the money in time to be able to pay these fees, so they can be able to pay their employees. And so the state of Florida is going to have to do something this next legislative session to ensure individuals' livelihood is not affected, and to make sure services are not affected by this miscommunication and how money is being passed down.
So Vicki Lopez, in the that was the school vouchers, and then sort of in a similar theme, the home hardening My Safe Florida Home program, hugely popular, on pause because there was not enough money. Now there is more money allocated in this special session, but again, kind of an open question with no numbers. And in this instance, this was meant to help lower insurance premiums down the line by hardening homes. There's really no information to make insurers toe that line, is there? Or I didn't see that in the bill.
No, there wasn't in the bill, but I think that certainly I have been speaking to a lot of insurance companies, and I have actually, the majority of my district is made up of condominiums, and condominiums were not included vis-a-vis the My Safe Homes. And I'd like to see the session actually move forward with something for condos. And I say that only because as soon as we can harden some of these buildings, remember, condominiums have been hit with high property insurance assessments. They're hit with their own regular deferred repairs and maintenance, and then they're hit with what we know is the structural integrity reserve study assessments. So anything that we can do to lower the insurance premiums for condominiums would be very welcomed, especially in my district. And I think, if we can get some money to either condo owners or condo boards, depending on, what their declarations say in terms of who owns who's responsible for the outdoor windows and doors, that would mean a huge, decrease in insurance premiums for condos. And you're right, we don't know how much. I didn't expect this program to be so vastly, popular, but there was such a waiting list.
It's free money.
Well, yes, but it's funny. I mean, I didn't expect people to take advantage of it. It's $10,000. You can fix your doors, windows, roofs. And that will give you a significant decrease in your insurance premiums. So I hope that we can do more of that to give people relief.
I want to talk a little bit more about that when we come back. Quick break, and we'll be back with Senator Jones and State Rep Lopez in a couple of minutes. Stay tuned. We are back talking all things session and a little plus with State Senator Shevrin Jones and State Representative Vicki Lopez. And I want to go back to something. I know, Vicki, you weren't seeing probably that Shevrin was nodding as you were talking about condominiums and the lack of access to My Florida Homes, because Shevrin Jones, in the Great Redistricting, you inherited a lot of condo dwellers in your district now. So tell me a little bit about what you're hearing from your new constituents because of not only the hurricane situation, but the post-Surfside condo laws that are about to really become expensive and concerning for people who live in condos.
Absolutely. And Representative Lopez and I both share the same sentiments because we both have a very large condo district. But along with that, I think with the condos, we're also hearing about insurance. That is the main topic of concern. And based off of the new rules that were just put into place last year when it comes to condos. I will say this, that Senator Pizzo, Senator Bradley, Representative Lopez and myself, we sat on a panel and we heard the concerns of people. And it is clear that this work is not done. We are going to have to go back into this legislative session to refine some of the things that we've done. Even one of the bills that I have that we'll be working along with Senator Bradley on is being able to ensure that there's training that happens for those who are on these condo boards, because many of these individuals are volunteers from who live within these buildings. But it is no secret, and I think Representative Lopez outlined it perfectly. There's clarity that needs to be done, and there's also cleanup that needs to be done when it comes to the condos in Florida, period.
Yeah. Vicki, I wanted to, this was not part of session, but in the short time we have together, I've been seeing that, at least on the Senate side, State Senate President Pasadomo has made mental health and mental health spending in that chamber a real focus for the upcoming session. Especially, some of our viewers this morning, and one in particular, knows that you're coming on, wanted to know and sort of project out on the health side, mental health spending, especially where it comes to things that taking away the criminal aspects of mental health that land so many people with these kind of issues in jail, in prisons. What do we expect? Frame what your priorities are and what to expect coming out of session upcoming in January.
So I have obviously been in the mental health field, both on the criminal justice reform side, but also on just access to mental health and making it affordable. And I think the House, this isn't a new discussion. I'm really grateful that President Pasadomo and the Senate is going to lift it up as a priority. When we talk about healthcare, we include behavioral healthcare in it. I do believe that we recognize that, the incidences of mental health have increased, especially during the pandemic and post-pandemic. And there is a great deal of, I think, people who don't have access to it or don't feel like they have access to it. And I think putting money towards it is going to be a real priority, certainly for the House, as we hear it is for the Senate. We want to be able to meet, people where they are, try to figure out ways in which we increase telehealth for behavioral health, which, worked pretty well during the pandemic. If we can continue to do so post-pandemic so that people have even more access. I'll also be looking at the way mental health works in schools. You remember that we put some money into the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas sort of pot of money. And I think that I'll be looking at whether or not children and their families are being served sufficiently and more effectively. So that's another piece of the equation that I want to look at as well. So across the board, I think we're going to have the latitude to really delve into mental health, what leads people into prison and jails. This is not a discussion that is new, because we've been hearing Judge Steve Leithman from Miami-Dade County having sung this tune for at least 15 years, that jails and prisons are not made for people who have mental health issues. They are better served through a crisis stabilization process and then through community-based, services. So I think everything's on the table, and I'm grateful for that. And I look forward to seeing. I am the vice chair of the new Select Committee on Health Innovation, which will be looking at some of these issues, and also the Medicaid reimbursement rates. Providers have a hard time finding licensed behavioral health professionals because they cannot compete with the open market. And so I'm hopeful that we will find a way to increase those rates so that, in fact, providers can hire qualified people to provide the services that we need.
Shevrin Jones, pick up that discussion, take it over to the Senate side. What have you heard from President Pasadomo, and what's your expectation? This is something I think that's really going to be a priority for public consumption for a long time.
I'll echo Representative Lopez, and I think we're actually right. I think we have all been making it extremely clear that mental illness or homelessness, these shouldn't be crimes. These are not crimes. Individuals, we cannot continue to stockpile people into our criminal justice system. It's too expensive to be able to do that. I think we've come to that conclusion that it's too expensive. The fact that I'm happy that the state, the legislature, and the leaders in both chambers are taking this approach to look at mental health is, I think, is A+. In my 12 years being in the legislature, the fact that we're going to focus in this area, I'm excited about this. But I think we need to really delve into something that that Representative Lopez said, and that is to our young people. How we approach this in our schools is going to be extremely important, but not just for our students, but also for our teachers also. We need to figure out a way, how do we incorporate our teachers in being able to access these mental health services that we're going to bring down to our students also. I think it's a win-win for both the student and the teacher.
And as a former educator, that is your wheelhouse, is it not?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
100%.
State Senator Shevrin Jones, State Rep Vicki Lopez, sure do appreciate your time, and you will be back talking about all of these things.
Thank you, Glenna. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Representative.